The galaxy had never been more at peace. Or so they thought. General Arthur Reaper Williams, hero of 1,000 covert operations, sat in a sterile interrogation room on the Zarin Dominion's flagship. The walls, smooth and metallic, seemed to pulse with the cold hum of a distant war engine. Williams, however, seemed unbothered, his jaw set in that familiar, unyielding way that made him a legend among Earth's special forces. His reputation for extracting his teams from the tightest of spots had earned him his nickname, and though he wasn't sure if the Zarins were impressed by it, he couldn't have cared less. The world was about to find out just how much they cared. A cold, robotic voice crackled through the speakers. General Williams, you stand accused of espionage, war crimes, and orchestrating the deaths of over 3,000 Zarin soldiers. Your sentence is final. You will be executed. Williams didn't flinch. Instead, he adjusted his shirt cuffs, the kind of meticulous habit that made him seem more like a high-ranking diplomat than a man about to be executed by an alien empire. He glanced up at the monitor, where a Zarin officer in full military regalia sneered down at him. Any last words, generals? Oh, I've got plenty, Williams replied with a grin that bordered on impish. But I'm saving most of them for my memoirs. The officer's lip curled. Mockery won't save you. Didn't expect it would, Williams said. He leaned back, folding his arms, a clear sign of someone utterly unafraid of whatever the Zarins had in store. But you'll regret this. I got friends. The officer scowled. We will hang you in front of all your people, human. Your death will be a symbol, a warning. A symbol? Williams chuckled, shaking his head. You really don't get it, do you? You've just put a target on your own backs. Every general I've ever worked with is watching this right now. And believe me, they'll be all too happy to repay the favor. The officer didn't know what to make of this. For the Zarins, the concept of facing death with a smile was alien, frightening, even. And Williams, a man who had orchestrated covert operations that had turned the tides of many conflicts, knew that. The human mind, asterisk is asterisk mind, was something the Zarins would never truly comprehend. Back on Earth, the broadcast was already sweeping across every screen. The execution of a high-ranking officer wasn't anything new, but this was different. This wasn't just any officer. This was General Williams, a living legend. The man who had turned the tide in every covert operation he'd led. The man who had taught his enemies to fear the sound of approaching boots. And now, there he was, about to be hanged by an alien empire who thought they could just erase him from the history books. Back in Washington, President Lincoln Adams, a man known for his stern demeanor and rarely ever showing emotion, watched the broadcast from his office. He leaned forward in his chair, his fingers drumming against the desk. A cup of coffee sat forgotten in front of him. The room was dead silent except for the faint sound of the broadcast. A general standing by his side cleared his throat. Sir, the footage is being streamed across all channels. The people are in shock. Adams barely looked up. They'll be more than shocked when we're through. The general paused. What do you mean, Mr. President? With a grim smile, Adams stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I mean, we declare war. If they think they can hang our best, they've got another thing coming. Prepare the fleet. Prepare the armies. We fight until every Zarin in the galaxy learns what humanity is capable of. At that moment, the president's decision was clear. Humanity would never back down from a fight, especially not when one of its own was publicly executed in such a way. The broadcast, now rippling through every human home, fueled an anger that could only be compared to the primal urge to protect one's own. General Williams might be dead, but his spirit? That wasn't something the Zarins could erase. Across the globe, people gathered in their living rooms, their eyes fixed on their screens as the news anchor solemnly recounted the events. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others clenched their fists, the words of the broadcast echoing in their minds. Asterisk, the United States of America hereby declares war on the Zarin Dominion. Asterisk, some thought it was a joke. Others thought it was a desperate blunder, a rash move that would lead to humanity's annihilation. But those who had served alongside General Williams knew the truth. This wasn't a call to war. This was the beginning of something much larger. The next day, the Pentagon initiated Operation Retribution. Military commanders, CIA operatives, and high-ranking officials from all over the world gathered in top-secret locations to discuss the retaliation. The Zarin Dominion might have thought they'd broken the spirit of humankind with one execution. But they had just lit a fire that could not be put out. And so, from the ashes of one man's death, humanity found its resolve. No one had ever expected this war to start with a public execution, but it would end with humanity's victory. No one knew exactly how, yet, but it was clear the galaxy would never forget the day they hanged an SAS general. As the announcement of war echoed across the stars, the laughter of one man lingered in the cold reaches of space. Williams might have been dead, but humanity had just begun. The war was no longer just about revenge. It was about proving that humans would never be conquered. Not now, not ever, and far beyond the stars, the Zarin Dominion would come to regret one fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity. The war machine had been dormant for years, a relic of a bygone era, buried beneath bureaucratic red tape and peace treaties. But now, the gears of war groaned back into motion, shattering the illusion of peace like an old, cracked mirror. The president's order had been clear: full mobilization. At the heart of this awakening was General Elizabeth "Lizzie" Stark, the youngest commander in the history of the United States Space Fleet, and more importantly, the woman tasked with overseeing humanity's retaliatory strike against the Zarin Dominion. She had been briefed in the cold, sterile war rooms of the Pentagon, where the murmurs of conflict had already begun to echo. The minute the news of Williams' execution hit, Stark had known her phone would be ringing with orders. But no one could have predicted the sheer scale of what was to come. "General Stark, we're ready to initiate launch protocols," a young officer said nervously, glancing at the massive screens showing the U.S. fleet status. The room hummed with tension, officers exchanging notes and coordinating every last detail. Stark stood tall, her steel-gray eyes fixed on the screens. Behind her, the sprawling image of Earth twinkled like a fragile gem in the black void of space. She folded her arms, a rare smirk curling the corners of her mouth. "Ready? Son, I was born ready. Now, let's show the Zarins what happens when they poke a bear." The officer blinked, clearly unfamiliar with the metaphor, but nodded in a way that suggested he'd be catching up soon. The command room buzzed with activity as Earth's black project fleets, clandestine warships constructed with technology far beyond what most of the world knew, began to stir from their hidden hangars beneath the oceans and in secret lunar bases. These ships had been designed for one purpose: to strike with unparalleled force, to render any enemy forces powerless before Earth's might. Each ship was a masterpiece of human ingenuity: AI-assisted systems, plasma cannons, stealth fields, and quantum engines capable of traveling light years in a fraction of the time. Among the commanders was Admiral Henry Graves, a seasoned veteran of the Cold War who had seen his fair share of geopolitical blunders, but never anything like this. He adjusted his spectacles and peered at the array of holographic maps projected before him. "You realize the Zarins won't know what hit them, right? This isn't just a few squadrons coming together for a skirmish. This is an all-out, intergalactic thrashing." Stark's eyes gleamed. "Exactly, Admiral. They wanted a war. Let's give them one they'll never forget." The order went out across the globe. Within hours, the First Fleet, a massive conglomeration of warships, fighter squadrons, and ground forces, was assembled and prepared for launch. Within a week, the Second Fleet was fully operational, standing by to reinforce. Humanity was no longer just reacting. They were going on the offensive. Stark, however, was no stranger to high stakes. She had risen through the ranks of the U.S. Navy the hard way, outsmarting, outgunning, and outlasting competitors both on Earth and in space. Her reputation was built on precision and daring, the kind of commander who could take a risky move and still come out with the upper hand. In this instance, though, she was following one simple directive when, "Admiral," she said, turning to Graves with a wry grin, "I assume your fleet's ready for a bit of action?" Graves chuckled, his graying beard twitching in amusement. "You bet. The Zarins are about to learn that we don't just fight with guns. We fight with everything." Meanwhile, On the ground, soldiers and special operatives prepared for the next phase. Delta Force was already in motion, deploying to strategic positions across the globe. The mission was clear: cripple Zalran infrastructure, disrupt their communications, and wreak havoc on their supply lines. Each operative, handpicked from the most elite units Earth had to offer, carried the weight of their dead general on their shoulders. They knew this mission was personal. Sergeant Morgan Klein, a battle-hardened veteran who'd lost more friends than he cared to count, slapped the side of his rifle and muttered to his squad, "I know they think we're going to be easy pickings. Let's make sure we give them a damn reason to regret that." His team, a mixture of grizzled veterans and younger recruits eager to prove themselves, nodded in agreement. They knew the stakes. They knew the score. But it wasn't just about killing Zalrans. It was about sending a message. Humanity would never be anyone's punching bag. Aboard the U.S. Liberty, the pride of the fleet, the command bridge erupted into motion. The massive starship, half the size of a space station and bristling with advanced weaponry, was humanity's ultimate weapon in this war. Its captain, Commander Sarah Goldstein, stood at the helm, watching as the galaxy stretched before her. Coordinates locked, Goldstein's voice rang out, steady as ever. "We're ready for our first jump. Prepare to engage," Stark ordered, her hands resting firmly on the console, though the excitement was palpable in her eyes. "Make it count." With a series of whirs and flashes, the USS Liberty shot into the stars, her engines tearing through space at unimaginable speeds. Behind her, an entire fleet followed suit, ready to lay waste to anything in their path. The Zalrans, for all their arrogance and technological might, had no idea what was coming. Stark's fleet didn't need brute force to win. They needed tactics, speed, and the element of surprise. The Zalrans had underestimated Earth, thinking humans were still the same primitive species they'd been when the Dominion first encountered them. But Stark's fleet was about to prove just how far humanity had come. As the first ships made their entry into Zalran space, they encountered an eerie silence. No massive defenses, no immediate counters. Just the quiet emptiness of a galaxy seemingly caught off guard. It was then that Stark's voice crackled over the comms, sharp and biting. "Admiral, I think we've just caught them napping." Graves' voice came back, full of dry humor. "Let's wake them up, shall we?" The attack began. Not with a bang, but with a precision strike that rattled the Zalran fleet to its core. Ships that had once appeared invincible were torn apart by plasma fire and guided missiles, their shields no match for Earth's new weaponry. Zalran fighters swarmed, but the human fleet responded with expert coordination, dispatching them one by one. It wasn't chaos. It was elegance and destruction. In that moment, Earth wasn't just fighting for revenge. It was fighting for its place in the galaxy, and the Zalrans were about to find out just how costly underestimating humanity could be. As Stark gazed out into the star-streaked blackness, she allowed herself a brief smile. They had awoken the war machine, and now there would be no stopping it. The Zalran Dominion had underestimated humanity. It was a fatal mistake that no one would live to regret, at least not on the Zalran side. As Earth's fleets continued their devastating advance, news of their victories spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Every alien species watching, wondering if the humans would bend or break, now understood. Humanity would not simply submit to domination. Instead, they had become the galaxy's most dangerous wildcard. General Elizabeth Stark, standing on the bridge of the U.S. Liberty, couldn't help but grin as the Zalran fleet's flagship, the Blood Omen, disintegrated in a fireball of energy. Behind her, Admiral Graves gave her a nod of approval, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, a hint of unease. They had taken Zalran space with terrifying ease, but the enemy was starting to adapt. That was almost too easy, Stark mused, glancing at the debris scattered in space. "We caught them napping, as you said," Graves replied, his voice grave. "But don't expect it to last. The Zalrans will regroup, and they won't make the same mistake twice." Stark's smirk never faltered. "Oh, I'm counting on it. I want them to regroup. Makes it more fun." The tension in the room was palpable, a sense of anticipation hanging thick in the air. The First Fleet had made significant gains, but now they were venturing deeper into Zarin-controlled territory. The true test was ahead, and it would not be so easy. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the President Lincoln Adams paced restlessly in his private office. The reports were flooding in. Humanity's forces were pushing farther than anyone had expected, and the Zarin Dominion was reeling. But the weight of this victory was not lost on him. The price of war was steep, and there would be no going back. "Sir, the Zarin ambassadors are demanding a ceasefire," an aide reported, standing nervously at the door. "They're offering to negotiate." Adams stopped pacing, staring out the window at the vast expanse of space beyond. He chuckled bitterly. "Negotiate? After they hung one of our generals? After they tried to wipe us out like insects?" He turned to the aide. "Tell them we don't negotiate with tyrants." In a distant corner of the galaxy, Zarin diplomats were in a frenzy. They had not expected humanity to respond with such ferocity. The Dominion had believed Earth would buckle under pressure, but instead, they had found themselves caught in a war they weren't prepared for. The Zarin High Council, in its infinite arrogance, had believed their superior technology and centuries of conquest made them invincible. Now they were realizing just how wrong they were. Commander Taurus, one of the Zarin Dominion's most seasoned military leaders, stood in front of the council, his fists clenched in frustration. "We underestimated them. We thought they were still a primitive species, unfit for the stars. Instead, they've proven themselves capable of more destruction than we anticipated." The High Council murmured among themselves. Their faces were tense, their greenish skin shifting in the low light of the war room. Taurus continued, pacing now, his voice rising. "They've done more than fight back. They've adapted. We face a species that can learn from every engagement, that can evolve on the battlefield. The human fleet is already inside our territory, and we cannot afford to underestimate them any longer." An older, wrinkled Zarin counselor scowled at him. "So, what do you propose? We retreat and allow them to claim victory?" "No," Taurus said, shaking his head. "We fight, but we need to change tactics. We must consolidate our forces and bring in the allies we've kept in reserve. The war is no longer a matter of simple conquest. We're fighting for our survival now." The council exchanged looks, and a long silence fell over the room. Finally, the High Commander spoke. "Then we will call upon the Kavar and the Voklians. It's time to bring the full might of the Dominion to bear." Back on Earth, the situation was escalating quickly. Earth's fleet, emboldened by their earlier victories, pressed forward with little regard for the consequences. Stark's strategy had been simple: push, and push some more until the enemy was utterly overwhelmed. But as the Zarins regrouped and rallied their allies, it became clear that the war was about to shift into an entirely new phase. Lieutenant Jenna Cole, an up-and-coming strategist in the fleet, had spent the last few days studying the movements of Zarin reinforcements. She turned to Stark, her face lit by the glow of the tactical map. "General, we got a problem. The Kavar have entered the fray. They're known for their brutal close-quarter tactics. If we don't adapt, we're going to get bogged down." Stark's eyes narrowed. She knew the Kavar well enough: ruthless, unstoppable, and completely unpredictable. They were a terrifying force, and their brutal fighting style was designed to break even the most disciplined soldiers. "We'll adapt," Stark said, her tone steely. "We'll use their aggression against them." Her voice carried the weight of a woman who had seen the worst that war had to offer, but had always found a way to win. The Kavar may have been known for their savagery, but humanity had always thrived on ingenuity, and that was a lesson the Kavar had yet to learn. Across the galaxy, the Second Fleet, a reinforced force of ships, fighters, and elite ground troops, began to mobilize. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure to succeed was enormous. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to assert their dominance. The galaxy had underestimated them, and now they would see what humans were truly capable of. As the fleets collided in the heart of Zarin space, a new phase of the war unfolded. One that would test every soldier, every strategist, and every commander. The Zarins were no longer the only ones on the offensive. Humanity, once thought to be weak, had become the hunters. Stark stood at the command center, watching as the first wave of Zalran ships appeared on the horizon. Get ready, people. This is what we've been training for. The battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy was about to begin. The stakes were no longer just revenge. They were about to become a fight for the future of humanity. And this time, there would be no turning back. As the first shots rang out, Stark's voice echoed over the comms, steady and unwavering. Let's show them just how wrong they were about us. The war had moved from tense skirmishes to an all-out, relentless fight for survival, and humanity was embracing every moment of it. No longer fighting just for the dead General Williams, no longer just avenging a public execution, humanity was fighting to prove that no one, no matter how powerful, could ever truly erase them from the galaxy. Stark had no illusions about what was at stake. The survival of humanity was on the line, and there would be no room for mercy or mistakes. "Sir, the Kivar fleet is coming in hot," Lieutenant Cole said, her fingers dancing across the holographic display. "We've already lost a few ships on the outer edge. They're brutal, and they're fast." Stark narrowed her eyes, watching the wave of Kivar warships break through the Zalran lines like a tidal wave crashing against a fragile shore. She smirked darkly. "Let them come. We've got a surprise waiting for them." In the belly of the U.S. Liberty, General Stark's voice crackled over the comms. "Hold position. No more retreat. We got them right where we want them." And then, the fleet's answer came in the form of the Cyclone, a new class of ship designed with human ingenuity in mind. The Kivar might have been fast, but they weren't ready for something that could turn their speed against them. Cyclones were equipped with adaptive plasma shields, quantum torpedoes, and an experimental anti-gravity field that allowed them to maneuver in ways the Kivar had never seen. It was time to make them regret their decision to enter this war. The battle was fierce, with Kivar ships zooming in and out of firing range, trying to slice through human lines with brutal precision. But humanity's ships were more than a match, their tactics a chaotic but effective counter to Kivar's swift approach. General Stark, knowing her fleet was outnumbered but far from outgunned, barked orders from her command chair. "Focus fire on the Kivar flagship, Warspite," she commanded. "If we can take out their command, the rest will scatter. Show them they're not as invincible as they think." As the U.S. Liberty locked its target on the Kivar command ship, Lieutenant Cole raised an eyebrow. "General, I think the Kivar are actually intimidated by us. I'm getting some weird signals. They're changing tactics." Stark grinned, the corner of her lips quirking upward. "Let them change all they want. We're about to make them wish they hadn't shown up." With one massive, coordinated assault, Stark's fleet unleashed hell. The Cyclone led the charge, cutting through the Kivar ships like a hot knife through butter, its advanced shielding holding firm against the onslaught of enemy fire. Plasma bursts lit the dark expanse of space as the Zalran fleet, struggling to keep up with their new Kivar allies, found itself caught between two enemy forces. Humanity's fleets were closing in from both sides. Admiral Graves, perched on the bridge of the U.S. Valiant, couldn't help but chuckle as a massive Kivar warship exploded in a fiery burst of blue plasma. "I knew humanity had it in them. They're starting to look like they belong out here." "Don't get cocky, Graves," Stark warned. "We've only just begun to show them what we're capable of. Keep the pressure on and don't let up." "Right," he said, a smirk on his face. "You just keep making those speeches, General. We'll do the heavy lifting." Back on Earth, President Adams stood in front of the world's leaders, watching the war unfold across countless screens. There was no more talk of diplomacy, no more diplomatic efforts. Humanity was no longer appealing for peace. It was sending a message. The Second Fleet, deployed earlier than anyone had expected, was wreaking havoc in the outer Zalran systems, and the ground forces on the homeworld were creating chaos with every attack. "We're in this to win it, gentlemen," Adams said, his voice firm. "And when this is over, the galaxy will know one thing for sure. You don't mess with Earth." The Zalran High Council, meanwhile, was scrambling to reorganize their forces. The Kivar might have been fearsome on their own, but the combined weight of the Second Fleet, backed by humanity's technology, was a sight to behold. Zarin commanders, who had once believed they could easily squash humanity beneath their boot, were now finding themselves in the fight of their lives. Commander Taurus stood in the war room, his fists clenched at his sides. The Zarins had never been forced into such a vulnerable position before. He growled, his gaze fixed on the holographic map of the battlefront. These humans, these primates, they've turned the tide. We cannot afford to lose another battle. His fellow counselors murmured among themselves, but no one had a solution. The humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something deeper, something intangible, and that made them all the more dangerous. Taurus slammed his fist on the table. We need reinforcements. Now, if we don't take Earth's fleets seriously, they will wipe us from existence. Meanwhile, General Stark was in the thick of it, her hands moving like a maestro conducting an orchestra of death. Every move she made in the command chair translated directly into victory. Her mind was sharp, calculating, and above all, relentless. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was a symbol, a force of nature that embodied everything humanity had fought for. Target the Zarin supply station on Forix 4, Stark commanded, her eyes flashing. If we take that out, their reinforcements will never reach us. I want it gone. The U.S. Liberty maneuvered into position, and with a swift flick of her hand, the ship fired its quantum torpedoes, erasing the supply station from existence in a single, precise strike. The explosion lit up the void like a miniature sun, sending shockwaves through the Zarin fleet. "Nice shot, General," Graves said over the comms, his voice full of admiration. "Just warming up," Stark replied, her voice steady, but underneath it was the unmistakable thrill of the fight. Humanity wasn't just winning this war. They were taking it to the Zarins with a confidence that was unmatched. As the battle raged on, the tide was clear. Humanity had awakened something primal inside itself. It was no longer about revenge or retaliation. It was about survival. And anyone who stood in their way, Zarin, Kavar, or anyone else, was about to learn that humanity fought not with rage, but with purpose. And the galaxy would tremble before them. The battle had raged for weeks, but now it was becoming clear. The Zarin Dominion was teetering on the edge of collapse. Stark stood on the bridge of the U.S. Liberty, her eyes focused on the screen as the Zarin fleet crumbled before them. The once mighty Dominion, with its countless fleets and technologically advanced warships, was now little more than a broken shadow of its former self. "Well, that was easier than I thought," Lieutenant Cole muttered, her fingers skimming across the console. "I mean, this is almost embarrassing." "Keep your focus, Lieutenant," Stark replied, her tone sharp. "We're not done yet. They may be retreating, but that doesn't mean they're finished. The real fight is about to begin." The truth was, even though the Zarin fleet was retreating, their power was far from extinguished. Commander Taurus had rallied what little was left of the Dominion's forces, retreating to their homeworld. The Zarin High Council, in desperation, had turned to their last-ditch weapon, an ancient relic of unimaginable power, the Star Forge. If they could activate it, they would have a chance to reverse the course of the war. But even as they made their move, they knew the end was near. "General Stark," Admiral Graves said, his voice low and full of gravity, "we've just intercepted Zarin communications. They're attempting to activate the Star Forge. If they succeed, they could build a fleet in mere hours." Stark's lips curled into a wry smile. "I think they're about to make their last mistake." The Star Forge, a massive, ancient structure hidden deep within the heart of Zarin space, was capable of creating ships of incredible power. The Dominion had kept it a secret for centuries, but now, with their empire crumbling, they were willing to gamble everything on it. They were willing to risk humanity's fury to create a final weapon to win the war. But Stark had other plans. As her fleet moved toward the Zarin capital of Vornok, Stark knew the stakes had never been higher. The Zarins had one chance to turn the tide, and if they were successful, it would take everything humanity had to stop them. The Liberty, flanked by its sister ships, cruised silently through the void, weapons primed, shields at the ready. But Stark wasn't worried about the Star Forge. She was worried about the Zarin High Council's desperation. "I want full tactical control," Stark said to Cole. We're gonna end this now. Cole's face lit up with a grin. Ready for some fun? Huh, generals? You have no idea, Stark replied. The final assault on Vornok came in waves. The Zalran capital was a sprawling city of metal and crystal, built to withstand any siege. But it hadn't counted on humanity's ingenuity. Stark's fleet moved in like a swarm of locusts, with coordinated precision. The Zalrans threw up their defenses, but humanity's technology, combined with their ruthless tactics, shattered every line of defense they tried to establish. Target their central command hub, Stark barked, watching as the city's lights flickered in the distance. We take that. We take everything. The Liberty surged forward, its weapons lighting up the night sky with devastating energy. Every shot hit its mark, sending Zalran warships spinning into flames. Stark's plan was simple: destroy the heart of the Dominion, and the rest would fall apart. The Star Forge was important, yes, but the Zalrans themselves were the real threat. If humanity could sever the head of the snake, the body would die. General, we've got incoming. Kivar reinforcements. Cole called out. They're trying to stop us from reaching the command center. Stark's grin widened. Let them try. The Kivar were fast and ferocious, but Stark had a secret weapon of her own, the Phoenix Squadron. A fleet of human-made fighters, equipped with experimental tech and combat strategies that no one had ever seen before. They tore into the Kivar ships like a hot knife through butter, creating chaos and disarray in their ranks. Nice work, Phoenix. Stark cheered over the comms. Now let's put the final nail in this coffin. But the Zalrans weren't done yet. Their last-ditch efforts to activate the Star Forge had begun, and the massive structure hummed with power as it sprang to life. The ground trembled as the colossal energy source began to charge, sending waves of heat and radiation into the sky. Stark knew they had to act fast. If the Star Forge reached full power, humanity would face an army of ships unlike any they'd ever seen. We need to move now, Stark shouted. She watched the countdown on the screen. Less than 3 minutes until the Star Forge would reach full capacity. It was time for the final push. Cole, get us in position, Stark said, her voice low and dangerous. We're going straight for the forge. The Liberty's engines roared to life as it moved toward the center of the Zalran capital. Every ship in the fleet followed in its wake, weapons locked and loaded. As they closed in, the Zalran forces began to panic, throwing everything they had at humanity's fleet. But it was too late. They had no time to mount a defense that could stop the inevitable. General, we got incoming fire, Cole warned. They're throwing everything at us now. But Stark remained calm. Hold your ground. We're ending this now. With a final burst of energy, the USS Liberty plunged forward, its weapons firing in perfect synchronization with the rest of the fleet. A barrage of quantum torpedoes, plasma shots, and guided missiles rained down on the Star Forge's core. The structure groaned as the first wave of attacks hit, but it held firm. Stark's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing. One more shot, she said, almost to herself. The final volley of weapons struck the Star Forge's core. The entire structure flared white-hot, and then, with a deafening explosion that rippled through space, it was gone. The shockwave sent debris and energy cascading out in every direction. Stark's ship rocked as the shockwave passed, but the mission was complete. Star Forge is down, Cole said, breathing a sigh of relief. It's over. But Stark wasn't celebrating yet. She knew better. The Dominion wasn't just about the Star Forge, it was about control. As the remnants of the Zalran fleet scattered, fleeing into the vastness of space, the message was clear. Humanity had brought the fight to their doorstep, and they had won. The USS Liberty drifted in the aftermath of the battle, the wreckage of Zalran ships floating in space like broken toys. Stark's eyes softened as she looked at the debris, knowing what they had accomplished. They had torn down an empire. A galaxy that had once laughed at humanity's insignificance was now left in the dust. But as the dust settled and the last Zalran ships limped away, Stark turned to her crew. All right, folks, let's get ready for the next one. The galaxy's a big place, and we've got a lot more to do. She paused, a wicked grin spreading across her face. We may have destroyed an empire, but we're just getting started.